you. I would like to welcome our second panel, Chairwoman Virginia Fox, Ranking Member Bobby Scott from the Committee on Education and Workforce. Chairman Fox.
There's a traffic jam here, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for being here. We're moving with unusual speed today because we have members that want to go to the White House Christmas party tonight. So, again, I
Don't
thank...
have to worry about me.
Well, I just thank both of you for being here in a timely fashion. I appreciate it. But Chairwoman Fox, you're always an old friend here, having served in this committee for many years, so I would welcome your testimony.
Okay, Mr. Chair. 1 second here. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for members of the committee for being here. It's no secret America's colleges and universities are on a downward spiral. At home, the Biden administration is pursuing an unlawful free college agenda. Abroad, foreign adversaries are peddling nefarious influence schemes at our research institutions. Both legislative measures that I'll speak in support of today work to address these concerns. The first measure is the Congressional Review Act, CRA, resolution to overturn the Biden administration's reckless income-driven repayment IDR rule, known as the Saving on a Valuable Education, SAVE, repayment plan. We can all agree the federal student loan system is broken, but this scheme will only further exacerbate the problems of rising college costs and excessive borrowing. Experts estimate that the SAVE Act will cost taxpayers as much as $559 billion, making it the costliest regulation in U.S. history. The reality is the Biden administration and its allies are using backdoor free college policies to enact their socialist fantasies and curry favor ahead of the next election, all at the expense of the American taxpayer. Democrats always talk about fairness, but there's nothing fair about the 87% of Americans who don't have student loan debt taking on the debt of the 13% who do have loans. That's why I urge the passage of this CRA resolution to stop the Biden administration's illegal scheme and send a strong message to the administration that Congress will not tolerate a dictator-in-chief. The second measure is H.R. 5933, the Deterrent Act, which brings much-needed transparency to the financial ties that our universities have with foreign entities. While it's not uncommon for American institutions to have research and financial partnerships with foreign institutions, we know that our adversaries like the Chinese Communist Party often hijack these legitimate partnerships to undermine our nation's interests. A new report from the Network Contagion Research Institute found that at least 200 higher education institutions withheld information on $13 billion in contributions from foreign regimes. Of course, this number is certainly just the tip of the iceberg. Without transparency, we have no idea the true amount of the use of these foreign funds. That's unacceptable and the reason we must pass the Deterrent Act. This bill holds institutions accountable by slashing the foreign gift reporting threshold for colleges, especially for adversarial nations like China, Russia, and Iran. It also closes reporting loopholes that have allowed institutions to skirt the rules. Most importantly, however, this bill puts in place strong enforcement mechanisms that will lead to greater accountability, like pulling Title IV funding for institutions that refuse to comply. The bottom line is that the Deterrent Act will keep our adversaries at bay and hold our institutions to a higher standard. With that, I urge passage of the Deterrent Act, and I yield back.
I thank the Chair, and it's my pleasure to welcome my good friend, Ranking Member Scott, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Cole, and other members of the committee. I speak in opposition to both bills. I'll begin with the HJ Res 88, the Congressional Review Act on saving on a valuable education plan. Last August, the Department of Education launched the SAVE plan, a new, generous, income-driven repayment, or IDR plan, to significantly lower monthly payments for many low-income and middle-income borrowers. also provides loan forgiveness earlier for low-balance borrowers than other IDR plans. Approved applications allow borrowers to have their income securely assessed through the Internal Revenue, so they don't have to recertify their incomes or reapply for IDR plans each year. Moreover, the balances will not grow due to unpaid interest. Repealing the SAVE plan will be extremely disruptive. Millions of Americans have already enrolled in this program. In fact, the Department released last month that 5.5 million borrowers have already enrolled. Those 5.5 million borrowers already enrolled in SAVE include millions who will have significantly lower payments. There are other challenges that we have in higher education that demand our attention. For example, students and families face a student debt crisis thanks to rising costs of attending college and the chronic state disinvestment in higher education. In fact, between 2008 and 2018, states spent on average 13% less per student after adjusting for inflation. And the buying power of the Pell Grant has also fallen dramatically from covering nearly 80% of the cost of tuition, room, and board at a public four-year institution in 1975 to now covering less than one-third of that cost. Students continue to grapple with mental health problems and substance abuse challenges, yet here we are, wasting our time on a resolution that not only will make it harder for Americans to afford college, but also it has no chance of passing. Last month, the Senate took up the similar resolution, and it failed. Bottom line is we're responsible for strengthening support for those seeking a college degree, not because everyone should be forced to get one, but because those who want a college degree should have access to that opportunity. As President Johnson noted, the higher education should be an opportunity afforded to everyone in this country who can qualify for that endeavor, not just for the wealthy few. So repealing the SAVE Act does nothing to make higher education more affordable or accessible, and I strongly urge my colleagues to oppose this resolution. We're also speaking opposition to H.R. 5933. The historically collaborations with global partners and careful federal investments in research have enabled our universities to make bold, forward-thinking strides in health science and technology for people around the world. Additionally, institutions have collaborated with the U.S. government to enhance our research ecosystems by attracting and retaining researchers and scholars from around the country, from around the world. These partnerships help drive intellectual and campus diversity, strengthen the inner workings of our economy, and give us an undeniable competitive edge. Institutions, however, must be transparent about the resources they receive from foreign entities, particularly as the federal government invests nearly $30 billion annually in our higher education's research and development efforts. However, H.R. 5933 does nothing to meaningfully protect research security at colleges and universities. This proposal will not only make it harder for institutions to be transparent about their foreign partnerships, it will also require faculty to report on any gift, even coffee or donuts, from a representative of a country of quote-unquote concern, and it would force them to deviate from the established compliance and reporting guidelines set forth under Section 117 of the Higher Education Act. Schools are already grappling with recruiting and retaining students and scholars, and if passed, H.R. 5933 will stall decades of innovative progress and jeopardize global research initiatives. Students and faculties are calling on Congress to help improve our higher education system and address discrimination on campuses. Unfortunately, certain provisions of this bill would only exacerbate the ongoing culture wars that have consumed my colleagues in this Congress. For example, legislation singles out partnerships with certain countries targeting researchers based solely on their nationality. And I've said before, we can achieve accountability and compliance without contributing to anti-Asian, anti-Semitic, or Islamophobic animosity. I've offered a thoughtful alternative to improve Section 117 compliance and support institutions as they evaluate and implement their research integrity and foreign influence policies. My amendment builds on the CHIPS and Science Acts and the Presidential Memorandum on Government-Supported Research and National and Development National Security Policy Guidelines. And specifically, it aligns reporting requirements to those of federal agencies and requires the Secretary of Education to go through negotiated rulemaking to address key implementation aspects of Section 117. So we must take targeted and thoughtful steps to protect our research and develop initiatives without jeopardizing global partnerships that benefit us all. Mr. Chairman, I have several letters I'd like entered for the record, and I'd just like to quote from one from the Asian American Scholar Forum, where they say that as a practical matter, this act would force scholars and researchers to scrutinize the immigration status of potential collaborators and would deter them from collaboration with individuals who may be perceived as immigrants. Moreover, many scholars would not have access to private information, such as immigration status of their peers, making this practically a difficult or impossible requirement for faculty, scholars, or researchers to meet. Additionally, the reporting requirement for contracts of no monetary value as it pertains to foreign entities and countries of concern would significantly chill even normal everyday communications as it may be perceived as an agreement.
Without objection, the documents are entered in the record.
Thank you, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman very much. Again, in the interest of time, as much as I'm tempted, I'll forego questions and comment, and I've returned to my good friend, the Vice Chair of the full committee, Dr. Burgess, for any questions he has for the panel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll follow your lead. I am tempted, but I will, in the interest of time, I'll yield back.
Recognize my good friend, the ranking member of the full committee.
Well, let me follow suit. I just want to say, Bobby, I agree with what you said, and I associate myself with your remarks. And Virginia, it's great to see you.
Thanks,
I yield
Mr.
back my
McGovern.
time.
Now recognize my good friend from Pennsylvania
I'll take that as a compliment.
for any questions he may have for the panel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the interest of time, I too am going to yield back.
I recognize my good friend, gentlelady
We
from
picked up a
Pennsylvania,
good
for any
time,
questions she
Joe.
may have. Okay, and I would recognize the gentleman from Kentucky for any questions he may have.
I'm actually going to go on with the trend here, although I had some questions for my good friend Bobby Scott. I'm going to yield back.
Okay.
I'll ask him personally.
I now recognize my good friend from Colorado for any questions he may have.
I do have a couple of quick questions, and I will apologize for breaking the trend, but
It's between you and your ranking member.
I know, as he's dutifully reminded me, so I will keep it very brief. I do have to just, to the ranking member and to the chairwoman, thank you both for being here. Thank you for your testimony. I just want to talk a bit about the student loan rule. Madam Chair, certainly respect your position, but I was a bit surprised by, I wrote the phrase you wrote down, or phrase rather that you used to describe this loan program. It was, quote, unlawful free college agenda, end quote. And part of what I'm struggling is trying to find where within this regulation that characterization would fit. And here's why. So just by way of example, my understanding of the program changes is that under the existing income-driven repayment program, the IDR, essentially a borrower would have 10% of their income, or rather, they would have to pay 10% of their income, and it would be classified at excess of 150% at poverty level, right? That's the baseline in the existing program today. And what the Biden administration is changing is essentially dropping that to 5% of income and then increasing the poverty level calculation to 225%. Is that generally accurate?
It is, but what will result in the income-driven repayment plan, we believe, is that only 22% of borrowers will actually pay back fully their loan. That is a very, very low percentage of people paying back their loan, and loan balances will be forgiven as early as 10 years instead of 20 to 25 years, which is done now. You know, we don't want to make college and university educations inaccessible. They're very accessible now. The problem we have is that many people that the cost of college is going up in direct proportion to how much money the federal government, that is, the taxpayers of this country, are putting into these programs. And by doing this, you're simply going to continue to drive up the cost of education. So we want the responsibility to be fairly borne by the people who borrow the money and benefit from it.
I thank you, Madam Chair. And what I would suggest, and I want to give the ranking member an opportunity to opine in here as well, I understand the argument that you're making, and I'm simply suggesting that the mechanics of this particular rule that the Biden administration has promulgated, I don't think could be accurately described as a free college agenda. When most of the changes that the Biden administration is pursuing, let me just give you an example. One of the changes within this rule is enabling a borrower who files their taxes separately from their spouse from not having their spouse's income used to calculate their expected repayment amount. That's a practical common sense change that a lot of members of Congress on a bipartisan basis have called for. Another change, just to give you an example, again, this is within the body of the rule, is that it would extend forbearance for those borrowers who enter into military service, for those borrowers who are undergoing cancer treatment, for those borrowers who are impacted by a natural disaster. That's one of the changes that the Biden administration has proposed in this rule. And to the extent there is forgiveness, as you said, it's a modification from existing programs, again, depending on the income levels, but it is not wholesale cancellation. Of course, we entertained a resolution about that particular issue earlier this year, but this isn't it. And so I would just say that I think this is a common sense way to ultimately ensure that Americans are not weighted down. You're talking about individuals who are raising a family, trying to afford groceries and pay their heating bills, that they're not weighted down unnecessarily by a large loan payment. So with that, I'll give the ranking member a chance to respond, and I think.
Well, I think we have a fundamental disagreement on our committee. I believe in the signing statement, when President Johnson signed the Higher Education Act, he said that it meant that any student from any state could apply to any college or university and not be turned away because the family is poor. Since then, the value of the Pell Grant is eroded, and the only way students can go to college now for a huge portion of them is by incurring crushing debt. That, in my judgment, is unfair. This allows those to pay what they can afford on their college debt for 10 to 25 years, but there ought to be some end to it. The president has a reasonable proposal to help people get into college, and once they have incurred the debt, be able to reasonably pay it back.
Thank you.
Gentleman, gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized for any questions she may have. Gentlelady from New Mexico is recognized for any questions she may have for the panel.
No, I associate myself as well with the comments of the ranking member and the goal of making sure that education is affordable for everybody, which was the goal both of when this started and with this rule. And with that, I yield back.
Thanks, gentlelady. Gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for any questions he may have for the panel. Gentleman from Texas is recognized for any questions he may have for the panel.
Yield back.
Gentlelady from Indiana is recognized for any questions.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
And gentleman from New York is now recognized for any questions he may have.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I just want to note for the record, I'm so proud of the cooperativeness of this committee and trying to make sure those with social obligations have a chance to meet them. And
Can
we
we
thank
arrange
both
for
of.
social obligations every time we're coming?
I wish we had more evenings with social
Social
obligations here, but no. But again, I thank both the witnesses for appearing, and they're certainly both excused.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I need to talk to you a minute.
Yeah, we got,
Is there anyone else seeking?
security hearing in the middle of the,
Well, what time does it start? I don't know what time it starts.
We're trying to proceed here. Is there anyone else seeking to testify on H.R. 4468, H.R. 5933, or H. Resolution 88? Seeing none, this closes the hearing portion. The chair will be in receipt of a motion from the gentlewoman from Indiana, Ms. Houchin.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee grant H.R. 4468, the Choice in Automobile Retail Sales Act of 2023 as structured rule. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the bill shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill. The rule provides 1 hour of general debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce or their respective designees. The rule makes in order only the amendment printed in Part A of the Rules Committee report. Each amendment shall be considered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. All points of order against the amendment printed in Part A of the Rules Committee report are waived. The rule provides 1 motion to recommit. The rule further provides for consideration of H.R. 5933, the Deterrent Act, under a structured rule. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides 1 hour of general debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and the ranking minority member of the Committee on Education and the Workforce or their respective designees. The rule provides that the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Education and the Workforce, now printed in the bill, shall be considered as adopted, and the bill, as amended, shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill as amended. The rule makes in order only those amendments printed in Part B of the Rules Committee report. Each amendment shall be considered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand of division of the question. All points of order against the amendments printed in Part B of the Rules Committee report are waived. The rule provides 1 motion to recommit. The rule further provides for consideration of H.J. Res. 88, providing for congressional disapproval under Chapter 8 of Title 5, United States Code, of the rules submitted by the Department of Education relating to, quote, improving income-driven repayment for the William D. Ford Federal Direct Loan Program and the Federal Family Education Loan, FFEL program, end quote, under a closed rule. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the joint resolution. The rule provides that the joint resolution shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the joint resolution. The rule provides 1 hour of general debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Education and the Workforce or their respective designees. Finally, the rule provides 1 motion to recommit.
Thank you very much. You've now heard the motion. Is there any discussion or amendment to the rule? Hearing no requests for further amendments, the questions on the motion to report. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Ask for a roll call.
Roll call's been requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess, aye. Mr. Rushenthaler. Mr. Rushenthaler, aye. Mrs. Fishbach. Mrs. Fishbach, aye. Mr. Massey. Mr. Massey, aye. Mr. Norman. Mr. Norman, aye. Mr. Roy. Mr. Roy, aye. Mrs. Houchin.
Aye.
Mrs. Houchin, aye. Mr. Langworthy. Aye. Mr. Langworthy, aye. Mr. McGovern.
No.
Mr. McGovern, no. Ms. Scanlon. No. Ms. Scanlon, no. Mr. Neguse. No. Mr. Neguse, no. Ms. Ledger-Fernandez. No. Ms. Ledger-Fernandez, no. Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, aye.
Clerk will report the total.
9 yeas, 4 nays.
The ayes have it. The motion report's agreed to. Accordingly, Ms. Houchin will be managing the rule for the majority.
And I was asking Mr. Neguse if he wanted to do it, but I guess, no, I will do it.
Well, without objection, the committee is adjourned.